In the waning years of the 15th century, as the sun began to set on medieval Europe, the kingdoms of Spain stood at a decisive crossroads. In 1478, King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile united their crowns through marriage, forging a powerful alliance that would shape the destiny of Spain for centuries. It was against this backdrop of political consolidation and rising religious zeal that the Spanish Inquisition was born. Later, the Spanish painter Francisco Goya would immortalize its shadow in his series Los Caprichos, depicting it as a monstrous figure, a testament to its haunting place in Spanish memory. The seeds of the Inquisition had been planted long before. The Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule, was nearing its conclusion. In 1492, the Catholic monarchs captured Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, completing the Christian triumph. Yet, victory brought a new challenge, enforcing religious unity across a land where Muslims, Jews, and Christians had coexisted for generations in fragile balance. The social tensions grew sharper as many Jews and Muslims converted to Christianity to escape persecution. These converts, known as conversos and moriscos, faced constant suspicion. Their faith and loyalty were doubted at every turn, and their lives became a test of proving their sincerity. The converso poet Juan Alvarez G. expressed this anguish when he wrote, "I am a new Christian, I confess it, but I am an old one in my faith." It was within this atmosphere of mistrust and religious fervor that the Spanish Inquisition took root. On November 1, 1478, Pope Sixtus IV issued a papal bull granting Ferdinand and Isabella the authority to appoint inquisitors in their kingdoms. They quickly acted, setting in motion an institution that would become one of the most feared forces in European history, a machine designed to guard Catholic orthodoxy, root out heresy, and reshape the spiritual landscape of Spain forever. Once granted papal authority, Ferdinand and Isabella wasted no time building the Inquisition into a formal institution. In 1483, they appointed Dominican friar Tomás de Torquemada as the first Grand Inquisitor, a man whose stern piety and relentless dedication to rooting out heresy made him a fearsome figure. Under his leadership, tribunals were rapidly established across Spain, in Barcelona, Seville, Toledo, and Valladolid, turning the Inquisition into a centralized system of power. The first major auto de fe took place in Seville on February 6, 1481. 6 conversos were burned at the stake before a watching crowd, their execution meant as both punishment and warning. Italian chronicler Pedro Matti de Anguira, who witnessed one of these public ceremonies, described it as a spectacle of horror and piety, a grim display of faith enforced through fire. As the Inquisition's reach expanded, so too did its methods. Torture became an accepted tool of interrogation, designed to force confessions and demonstrate absolute control. Techniques like the strappado, suspending the victim by the wrists and dropping them suddenly, and the potro, a rack that stretched limbs to breaking point, became infamous across Spain. The screams of the accused echoed through the dungeons, a chilling reminder of the price of nonconformity. Between 1478 and 1834, an estimated 150,000 people would stand trial under this system, with 300 to 500 executed. Historian Henry Kamen estimates that from 1560 to 1700 alone, around 50,000 were subjected to torture. Fear seeped into every corner of Spanish society, neighbors informed on neighbors, books were censored, ideas suppressed, and silence became a means of survival. But this was only the beginning. With its machinery firmly in place and the first flames lit, the Inquisition was ready to expand its power beyond Spain's heartland, and even across the ocean, bringing entire new worlds under its shadow. As Spain's empire expanded across the oceans, the Inquisition followed close behind, determined to enforce Catholic orthodoxy on every shore. By 1569, the first permanent tribunal was established in Lima, Peru, followed soon after by courts in Mexico City and Cartagena, extending the Holy Office's authority deep into the Americas. These tribunals became the moral and spiritual overseers of colonial life, policing not only settlers but also indigenous peoples, African slaves, and anyone suspected of holding beliefs outside church doctrine. In the New World, the Inquisition's mission was twofold: to protect the faith from heresy and to eradicate native religious practices that were seen as pagan. Sacred sites were destroyed, ceremonial objects confiscated, and priests worked hand in hand with inquisitors to convert indigenous communities. The Mexico City Tribunal even issued a decree banning the use of peyote, a plant central to native rituals, labeling it a work of the devil. Punishments in the colonies were just as brutal as those in Spain. The accused were interrogated, tortured, and publicly humiliated before being imprisoned, exiled, or executed. In 1781, the Inquisition's authority intersected with colonial power during the trial and execution of Tupac Amaru II, a nobleman who led an indigenous rebellion in Peru. His death became a symbol of Spain's determination to crush resistance and maintain control at all costs. These colonial tribunals did more than punish heresy. They reshaped culture, suppressing language, stories, and traditions that had endured for centuries. The spectacle of the auto de fe was recreated in plazas from Lima to Mexico City, reinforcing Spain's authority through fire and fear. But as the Inquisition spread outward, its net also grew tighter at home. The focus would soon turn inward again, falling on specific groups, conversos, Moriscos, Protestants, and anyone who dared to think differently, and unleashing some of the most infamous trials in Spanish history. As the Inquisition tightened its grip, its gaze fell on groups whose loyalty was deemed suspect. Chief among these were the conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity often under duress, and the Moriscos, Muslims who had accepted baptism but still practiced their ancestral faith in secret. For the conversos, suspicion was a constant companion. The tragic case of Luis de Carvajal, born in Benavente in 1537, became emblematic of their fate. Carvajal fled to Mexico hoping for refuge but was arrested by the Inquisition, tortured, and finally burned at the stake in 1596 along with his mother and 3 sisters during a public auto de fe in Mexico City. The Moriscos faced a similar fate. In 1568, the Alpujarras region of southern Spain erupted into open rebellion under the leadership of Ibn Humaya, as Moriscos resisted the Inquisition and the crown's repressive policies. The revolt lasted 3 years, leaving thousands dead. In the aftermath, the Spanish crown issued an edict expelling all Moriscos between 1609 and 1614, forcing an estimated 300,000 to 600,000 people to abandon their homes and seek refuge in North Africa or the Ottoman Empire. Protestants were also targeted, especially as the Reformation swept Europe. In 1559, the Inquisition discovered a Protestant network in Valladolid led by nobleman Carlos de Siso. Trials followed, ending with several members, including de Siso, burned at the stake. The crackdown was so thorough that by the end of the 16th century, Protestantism had virtually vanished from Spain. Even accusations of witchcraft came under the Inquisition's reach. The Basque Country saw a wave of trials, with the infamous 1610 Zugarmurdi case leading to 11 women being burned alive in Legrano. King Philip IV himself wrote to the Inquisitor General expressing alarm over the great number of witches in the realm, urging even harsher measures. But these were only the victims. Behind their trials stood a vast, secretive legal machine, one that turned whispers into death sentences and made fear a permanent resident of Spanish life. The true power of the Inquisition lay not only in its reach but in its cold, methodical legal machinery, a system designed to inspire fear as much as to deliver justice. The process often began with a secret denunciation. Anyone could accuse a neighbor, rival, or even a family member of heresy. The accused never learned the name of their accuser, leaving them defenseless against false testimony. In 1486, the Inquisition formalized this network of secrecy, establishing thousands of familiars, informants whose duty was to report even the faintest sign of unorthodox belief. Historian Henry Kamen estimated that by the mid-16th century, over 20,000 of these agents operated throughout Spain, creating a web of suspicion that touched every corner of society. Once denounced, the accused were summoned before the tribunal. Interrogations could last hours or even days, with inquisitors pressing relentlessly for confession. Dominican friar Tomás de Torquemada, the first Grand Inquisitor, was known for marathon questioning sessions, and chroniclers recorded that some suspects were kept awake for 3 nights until they finally broke down. In Córdoba, Inquisitor Diego Rodríguez Lucero gained a reputation for his cruelty, using devices such as the seat of judgment, a spiked chair that left victims bloodied, and the trampa, a contraption that crushed their fingers until they screamed for mercy. If psychological pressure failed, the tribunal authorized torture, sanctioned by papal decree since 1252, to force confessions. Victims were reminded that refusal to confess could lead to execution. The legal process concluded with the auto de fe, a grand public spectacle in which sentences were announced and punishments carried out before the gathered crowds. These ceremonies were carefully staged, mixing religious ritual with grim theater to terrify the population and reinforce the Inquisition's absolute power. But the auto de fe was only the surface. Beneath the processions and prayers lay the dark, windowless torture chambers, places where pain itself became a tool of faith, and where the Inquisition's most infamous devices awaited their victims. Beneath the tribunals, in dark stone chambers, the Inquisition's most feared weapons awaited. Torture was not just punishment, it was a calculated ritual meant to break body and soul. The rack stretched victims until joints tore apart, the strappado yanked arms from their sockets with sudden drops, and the taka or water torture simulated drowning until prisoners confessed simply to breathe. Even more terrifying was the question, where victims were bound to the potro, a wooden frame with rollers that shredded skin and muscle until the accused either confessed or died. The chambers were silent but for the sound of pulleys creaking and screams echoing against stone walls. Survivors were often left crippled, their minds shattered, yet their forced confessions sealed their fate in court above. These devices became symbols of a system that prized obedience over truth. And when the interrogations were done, the condemned still faced the most public ritual of all, the fiery judgment that awaited them under the open sky. The Inquisition's reach spared no one, not even Spain's brightest minds. Fray Luis de Leon, a brilliant theologian and poet of Converso descent, was imprisoned for 4 years simply for translating the Song of Songs into Spanish. Though acquitted, he emerged scarred, writing that happiness and misery were merely comparisons between states. Teresa of Avila, the mystic reformer, faced denunciation by a fellow nun and narrowly escaped conviction. Other women, like Lucrecia de Leon, were jailed for claiming prophetic dreams. Whole towns suffered collective punishment. In Llerena and Toledo, hundreds of conversos were tried, with entire families burned in single ceremonies. Similar fates met scholars like Antonio de Nebrija, whose corrections to the Latin Bible nearly saw him condemned. The message was clear: intellect, dissent, or even whispered doubts could be fatal. But silencing individuals was not enough. To control thought itself, the Inquisition would soon turn its gaze toward books, classrooms, and the very language of Spain, a censorship that would shape the nation's mind for centuries. To crush dissent at its root, the Inquisition moved beyond individuals and targeted ideas themselves. In 1502, Ferdinand and Isabella banned the import of foreign books without church approval. By 1558, the first index of prohibited books appeared, a list that grew for centuries, banning works by Erasmus, Galileo, and countless others. Even Spanish Bible translations were outlawed, as inquisitors feared that scripture in the vulgar tongue would open the door to heresy. Book raids swept through Spain, with thousands of volumes burned. The Inquisition banned classics like La Celestina for obscenity and prohibited teaching Copernican astronomy in universities. Scholars and professors were required to swear loyalty oaths, and even approved works could later be censored. Archbishop Bartolomé de Carranza, one of Spain's leading theologians, was imprisoned for 17 years on suspicion of heresy. The result was a chilling silence over Spain's intellectual life. Creativity shrank, free thought became dangerous, and a culture of fear settled over classrooms and pulpits. But Spain was no longer the Inquisition's only stage. Across the ocean, its shadow was falling on entire civilizations waiting to be remade or destroyed. When Spain crossed the Atlantic, the Inquisition followed like a shadow. In 1570, the first tribunal was founded in Lima, followed by Mexico City and Cartagena, extending the Holy Office into the heart of the colonies. Its mission was clear: to enforce Catholic orthodoxy and crush all traces of native religion. Sacred temples were destroyed, idols burned, and indigenous ceremonies banned as pagan blasphemy. The Mexico tribunal outlawed peyote and other ritual practices, threatening death for those who refused conversion. Indigenous leaders who resisted paid with their lives. The execution of Tupac Amaru II in 1781 symbolized the Inquisition's power to destroy rebellion as well as heresy. African slaves also became targets, accused of witchcraft and devil worship, with several burned at the stake in Cartagena. Yet resistance endured. Chroniclers like Felipe Guaman Poma de Ayala risked everything to document Spanish abuses, leaving a searing indictment of colonial rule. But as the Enlightenment dawned, cracks began to appear. The world was changing, and the once unstoppable Inquisition would soon face its greatest trial: the struggle to survive in an age of reason. By the 18th century, the Inquisition's iron grip began to loosen. Under King Philip V, royal oversight limited its censorship powers, signaling the first cracks in its authority. Enlightenment thinkers like Benito Feijó and Leandro Fernández de Moratín condemned the Inquisition as a relic of superstition, warning that its cruelty created atheists rather than believers. Public opinion shifted as high-profile cases exposed its weakness. The trial of Pablo de Olavide ended in acquittal, humiliating the tribunal. The Napoleonic invasion of Spain in 1808 dealt a near-fatal blow. In 1813, the Cádiz Cortes formally abolished the Inquisition, declaring it incompatible with justice and liberty. Though restored briefly by Ferdinand VII, liberal revolts in 1820 forced its suppression once again. Finally, in 1834, Queen Regent Maria Cristina signed the decree dissolving the Inquisition forever. Its tribunals closed, its assets seized, and its dungeons fell silent. But the shadow it cast remained. Generations had been shaped by fear, censorship, and blood. The question lingered: could Spain truly escape the specter of the Holy Office, or would its legacy continue to haunt the nation's soul? The Spanish Inquisition, which began in 1478 and ended in 1834, left scars that lasted far beyond its final decree. Over 3 centuries, countless men, women, and even children faced trials, torture, and death, their only crime often being difference. Its tribunals silenced thinkers, censored books, and burned heretics in public squares, turning faith into fear. Even Queen Isabella I, whose authority helped create it, was said to tremble at the power it gained. Yet history remembers not only the terror but also the resilience. Mystics like Teresa of Avila, poets like Fray Luis de Leon, and anonymous victims who endured the flames became symbols of the human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. As Spain entered the modern age, the Inquisition faded into memory, but its shadow remained, a reminder of how absolute certainty can become a weapon. Today, historians still debate its numbers, its motives, its necessity. But its lesson is clear: when fear governs faith, humanity pays the price. The story of the Inquisition warns us that even in the darkest times, courage and truth must find a way to survive, or the fires will rise again.